You sit in class, flipping through your history textbook. You read about kings and conquerors, revolutions and independence movements. But something feels off. Where are the stories of the people who resisted quietly? The voices of the oppressed? The mistakes your country makes? You start to wonder, why do we learn these parts of history and not others? The truth is, history isn't just what happened. It's what gets remembered, and more importantly, what gets taught. Some stories are chosen, others are left out, sometimes by accident, often on purpose. Let's talk about why that happens and why it matters. History is told by the people in charge, not always the ones who lived it. You've probably heard the quote, "History is written by the victors." It gets tossed around a lot, but it's honestly one of the realest things ever said. Because when you look at what we're taught in school, you start to realize history isn't just facts and dates, it's a version of the past, carefully selected by whoever's in charge. And let's be real, people in power don't usually like to make themselves look bad. So what happens? We get history that's cleaned up, that highlights all the glory moments, the freedom fighters, the independence days, the victories. But the darker stuff, the mess, the injustice, the things that make a country look less heroic, that often gets skipped, sugar-coated, or buried under vague terms like unrest or conflict. Like, yeah, we might learn about how a country gained its freedom, but not so much about how that same country might have oppressed others or ignored its own people's struggles right after. Textbooks become these carefully edited highlight reels, full of pride, but missing a lot of truth. And here's the thing, it's not always about lying to us. It's more subtle than that. It's about what gets left out, what stories are considered important, and who gets to tell them. Spoiler alert, it's usually not the people who were colonized, silenced, or systemically excluded. That's why school history tends to focus on national pride, major victories, and heroic moments, while quietly skipping over anything that might feel messy or uncomfortable. Oppression, exploitation, injustice. If it doesn't fit the neat story, it gets watered down or left out entirely. It's not always about rewriting history. Sometimes it's just about selecting it, choosing what to spotlight and what to leave in the shadows. And once you start noticing that, you can't unsee it. You start to spot the pattern, the sanitized versions, the feel-good narratives. The same few names and dates are on repeat, while entire communities and struggles barely get a mention. Which brings us to the next piece of the puzzle. Textbooks are basically PR for the nation. Let's be real, a lot of what we learn in school isn't just about facts, it's about identity. Education systems are often built to create a sense of unity, national pride, and belonging. That's not always a bad thing. Every country wants its people to feel connected to their roots. But here's where it gets tricky. When the goal becomes making everyone feel proud at the cost of the full truth. So we get stories that lift up the heroes, but leave out the people who were left behind, hurt, or silenced along the way. We hear about independence, but not about who was excluded from it. We celebrate progress, but rarely pause to ask, progress for who? And what's wild is, depending on where you're born, you might grow up with a completely different version of the same event. One country might call it a liberation, while another sees it as an invasion. And both textbooks will say they're telling the truth. So yeah, it's not just about what's taught, it's how it's framed. History becomes less about understanding the past and more about building a clean, safe, feel-good story for the future. One that avoids hard questions, one that avoids blame. But if we're only taught to feel pride and never to reflect, question, or take accountability, then are we really learning history or just a highlight reel? But once you see how curated it is, you can't help but ask, who's actually deciding what gets taught? Politics always finds a way in. Here's the thing, a lot of us don't realize until we're older. School curriculums aren't designed by historians sitting in a quiet library with a stack of facts. They're shaped by politics. Governments, education boards, and policymakers play a huge role in what goes into textbooks. And guess what they often want? Stability, control, no drama, definitely no national reckoning. That means anything too controversial, anything that could cause outrage or spark debates, is often scrubbed out or glossed over. Not because it didn't happen, but because it might make people uncomfortable. Military takeovers, ethnic cleansing, institutional racism, gender-based violence. If talking about it challenges the image a government wants to project, it's probably not making it into the lesson plan. So instead of using history to learn from our mistakes, we often use it to hide them. It's not even subtle sometimes. A change in government can literally result in changes to school books. Like flipping a switch. Suddenly, certain figures are cast as villains or saviors based on who's in charge. And if that doesn't mess with your sense of reality, wait till you hear this. Some stories never even made it in. Not all erasure happens on purpose. Sometimes it happens because those in power were never listening in the first place. See, not all history is written down. A lot of it, especially in indigenous, rural, or marginalized communities, is passed down through stories, songs, and memories. Oral history, community knowledge. But when the people writing textbooks come from privilege or belong to the dominant group, they don't always see those stories as official. They get labeled as myths or folklore or just ignored. That's why you can go through years of history classes and barely hear about women who led revolts, workers who shaped cities, minority communities who built nations, everyday people who resisted quietly. It's not just oversight, it's a pattern, a reflection of who had the mic and who didn't. And once you realize how many voices were left out of the version of history you were taught, you kind of want to go back and start over. Because learning real history means asking, who's missing from this story and why? There's only so much time, and teachers can't cover it all. Let's keep it real. No matter how passionate your history teacher is, the school year is only so long. There's just not enough time to cover every story, every event, every voice. So curriculums end up focusing on the big stuff, the major wars, famous leaders, and national holidays, usually from a big picture, global or national perspective. That means a lot of smaller, local, or less popular stories get left out. And honestly, that sucks. Because just because something isn't in your textbook doesn't mean it's not worth learning. Some truths are hard to hear, so they get skipped. Now here's where things get even trickier. Talking about the painful parts of history, like genocide, slavery, or ethnic violence, is tough, really tough. It can upset people, divide communities, and make classrooms uncomfortable. So sometimes schools avoid these topics. They think it's protecting students or just trying to dodge a messy conversation. But ignoring those dark chapters, it doesn't erase them. It just pushes the pain under the rug, where it festers. Why does this matter? Because if we only ever learn one side of the story, we miss out on the whole picture. We grow up thinking history is simple, black and white, heroes and villains, when really it's messy, complicated, and full of contradictions. It's about people, their choices, struggles, and emotions. Knowing what's been left out helps us. Ask smarter questions, think critically about what we're told, see things from other people's perspectives, become more understanding and empathetic. So, what can we do? Start by asking questions. If something feels off or missing, don't let it slide. Dig deeper. Listen to voices you haven't heard before, through books, documentaries, podcasts, or talking to people from different backgrounds. And push for education that doesn't just celebrate the easy stories, but includes all the stories, the good, the bad, and the complicated. Final thoughts. History isn't just some dusty subject about the past. It shapes how we understand the world today. If we only learn the parts that make us feel comfortable or proud, we risk making the same mistakes all over again. Real learning means facing the full story, even the parts that hurt or make us uncomfortable. And that's how we actually grow. If this got you thinking, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on more deep dives like this. Let's keep asking questions, learning the full story, and growing together. See you in the next one.